Do you see Mahathir as what you think Mahathir was in the 90s?
I think Mahathir changed. Mahathir definitely changed in the 2018.
In what way?
It was more democratic.
He was forced to be democratic.
That also reflects the environment, right? The context of the era.
Hello, Internet. Once again, this is Kopitiam Council. As always, you have with us is Adi and Hafiz here. And for this episode, we're going to have another special guest, Adi. And this special guest is an economist. But before we introduce him, let's ask AI, who is Hafiz Noor Shams? So let's go there. And then let's ask.
This is in theme with the last two interviews we had. Since Prime Minister Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim, the man that puts A and I in AI, is really championing it. So I think we should try implement that in our own work.
Yeah, we try to incorporate AI to this. And we want to find out from you, is this accurate or not? So according to AI, Hafiz Noor Shams is a Malaysian economist, columnist, and author. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the University of Michigan and a Master of Economics from the University of Sydney. Hafiz has worked with the Finance Ministry of Malaysia, the Financial Times, and the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas. He's also a former columnist for Malaysian Insider and the Malay Mail. How's that for introduction?
That sounds okay. I mean, as typical with the AI, it's a little bit of inaccuracy. It's like a soft inaccuracy.
Okay. But generally, it was accurate.
Generally, it's okay.
Okay. I think that's good enough for the introduction. All right. Before we start into the more heavy subjects, let's start with who you are and a bit of your background.
Right. Apart from the AI introduction just now, I'm not quite sure what I should say. I mean, I'm an economist, trained as an economist, working as an economist at one of the MNC based in Kuala Lumpur. I live in Malaysia for almost all my life, apart from times when I were doing my degrees or were doing for education or maybe take a holiday somewhere else. Mostly based in Kuala Lumpur. Live in Kuala Lumpur, a little bit of Kuala Kangsar for a couple of years. All right. And that's pretty much it. Maybe a little bit, in Alor Gajah with my grandparents a long time ago.
So your kampung is Kuala Kangsar?
Right, no. I went to school in Kuala Kangsar.
Okay.
But my kampung is in Malacca, Alor Gajah.
All right.
Okay. Well, in Sabah, we don't really come across a lot of economists actually because there aren't a lot in Sabah. There's a lot of them here. So I just want to know what got you into this kind of field? What was that interests you?
Right. Well, they go all the way back. I was supposed to do engineering. I got scholarship for engineering, and then. But the thing is, when I got the scholarship, Malaysia just had a financial crisis, like Asian financial crisis, and because of that, while I was doing my foundation for my undergraduate for engineering, I did calculus, differential equation, all those stuff, physics. I also wanted to do minor in economics because I wanted to understand what happened to Malaysia in 1997. Because in 1997, I was probably 15 years old, 16, 17. And it was as a young person, there's no background at all in economics. You don't really feel it because I was in boarding school. Boarding school is like a very big bubble sometimes. It's very bad for you. But when you go outside, you realize things are not great, right? But you don't understand why. So I wanted to understand that. So I took minor in economics, and I realized when I was doing my courses, and I realized engineering is a very dull subject for me.
Yep.
It's about, I mean, I understand the force, how to calculate the force, how to calculate the current, how to calculate the output.
It's very dry.
But in terms of economics, you also dry a lot of mathematics. But at the same time, there's a narrative happening in the background. Say why this happened, how this get there. So I wanted to do that. I think that was my interest. So along the years, along my courses, I realized I've totally lost interest in engineering, but I also already had a lot of math with me, which can be used for economics. So I decided I switch, and my sponsor doesn't seem to mind. So great for me. So I did economics ever since.
All right. Moving forward a bit after your university and whatnot, working in corporates, How was it to serve under LGE during the PH 1.0?
It was a experience because Linggo Eng is a very hard person to work with.
Hard person as dealing with him, or he's just
He's a very demanding person. I would say he's a perfectionist.
okay.
I would think it's very perfectionist. So if you approach him with something, you better make sure you done your homework,
All right.
or else you're gonna get it.
Yeah.
I'm saying this not as a criticism, but as a person during that time, I think I can understand why we would need that kind of person. Right? You need discipline. You need discipline, and things are very unforgiving during that time. Any single mistake you do, anyone would do, regardless whether he did it or his team did it or somebody on the government did it, they're gonna get criticized very badly.
What was your role mostly at the time?
I think I'm a errand boy. I was a special officer for one of several special officers. Errand boy. Sometimes I do coffee, but sometimes I sometimes, for instance, there are proposal. You look into the proposal. You try to think through it whether it makes sense or not, and then when it's time to go to him and you advise him whether this makes sense or not, whether it's okay or not. If it's not okay, then you have to deal with the officers in the ministry. So you sort of go in between the minister office and the civil service. So you talk to make sure things are aligned. Sometimes you're just an event organizer. Sometimes,
Okay.
right? Yeah, someone invited minister, and then you have to make sure that the event A, B, C, D, E is done. Make sure that it goes well. There's no like shocking surprise. I mean, make sure that doesn't happen.
The whole protocol things observed.
They don't like surprises.
Yeah. So basically, you're a jack of all trades, lah.
Okay.
You advise all the way from economic matters to become an errand boy. So that's the reality of being a special officer. It's not very, sexy.
Okay, so I think we can just get into the more nitty gritty of.
Right.
So we're just talking about a book that you've published, which is you mentioned something about civic identity instead of ethnic identity.
Yeah.
Could you explain what you mean by this when you are talking about being a Malaysian? Because sometimes these things overplay one another. Sometimes
Right.
some people emphasize civic identity, some people emphasize more on ethnic identity. What do you mean by that?
Right. I think the easier part is to first understand civic nationalism, civic identities. I mean, it's not civic, sorry, ethnic identity. Because that's probably more natural for a lot of people.
for us.
But probably more natural for the whole world, in fact. That was how nationalism came to be in the first place, right? Ethnic nationality is like what you identify as a community. I mean, probably the most ethnic identity I can identify is Malay. And I don't know about you. It could be anything. I'm sure there's other people as well, right? That have affinity for their own communities. Like you have history, you have cultural background that you grow up with. So these are natural. So in Malaysia, you have all these things, right? In terms of Malaysia, it's a hodgepodge of ethnic identities merged together, interacting together, growing up together. Civic identity is the one that tried to get everybody have the same idea about your own identity, right? It's not necessarily everybody the same, but you subscribe to a higher identity in this sense. In our reality is Malaysian. The idea of us being Malaysian. So that's it. And also, I think this is true for a lot of countries as well. For Indonesia, for instance, Indonesia is much more diverse compared to us, and they tried very hard to make sure that their civic identity is the overriding identity Indonesian, right? And then, in fact, instead of having orang Jawa, orang Melayu, orang Makassar, orang Betawi, orang
Chindo.
yeah, whatever there is lah. Indonesia is like you look at the map, it's very diverse. So that's the difference lah between civic identity, particularly a very encompassing identity compared to ethnic identity, which can be multiple communities.
And how do you feel about the whole civic identity experiment in Malaysia? How would you appraise it so far?
I think it's a complicated progress. I think they're progress, definitely. Yeah. They're definitely, because these days, if you compare to 60 years ago, nobody called themselves Malaysian 60 or 70 years ago. But now I think you do have that identity as probably one of the strongest rival identity. In Malaysia, probably multiple rival identities in Malaysia right now. And the Malaysian identity compared to Malay identities or Chinese or even all the other states and location have their own identities. It's now competing, right? So Malaysianness is over there. So there a lot of progress need to be done, but given the complexity of our world right now compared to technology, I think you should expect a lot of conflict and rivalry in terms of identifying, in terms of defining, in fact, our identity.
All right, there is a chapter in your book where you talk about slogans, all right?
Right.
And then you argue it was successful in the 90s. It was so successful when it helped Mahathir with his political survival. Do you think slogan can still work wonder now in 2024, or do you think it's just with the distraction with TikToks and social media, people just don't buy it anymore?
Yeah, I think it could work, but I think it's much harder these days. And like you mentioned just now, has to do with technology. The technology back in the 90s was very one-sided. It's not interactive. It's authoritarian, one could say so, as I written in the book. So you could, some ways, because of the way technology work, shape people's opinion more effectively than we could do today.
Okay.
Today, if you do that, people probably would say, come on, dude. Who do you take us for? Right? It could be that it's so the difference in technology, the development of technology has made us today in an ironic way, paradoxically more what do you call that? Not unifying, but disparate, live in our own bubble, decentralized. So I suppose that's the point of internet in the first place. But that's the reality we face now. So we make it very harder for slogan that happened in the 1990s, or even before that even, to work today. I mean, one example is One Malaysia, right? It never really get to the success that things like Wawasan 2020 had. Or even like, the 3R, or not 3R, sorry, 3M.
3M.
Membaca, mengirim, menulis, in terms of the slogan for education system. But now education, very difficult.
Alluding to that, how you mentioned more authoritarianism back in the 90s, of course, that was perfect grounds for Mahathir to enact his whole Machiavellian politics, right? So, I mean, compared to the environment and landscape we have now with Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim, who, for all intents and purposes, was a student of Mahathir's, right? How would you compare them, Mahathir in the 90s to Anwar now, from the landscape to even the styles of leadership and politics?
I don't know. I think they're probably... So Anwar, I don't know. I'm not a great judgment of character sometimes, but I think what important here is really the environment they found themselves in. Anwar these days obviously as Prime Minister live in a more democratic environment. He cannot do what Mahathir did. In 1990s, right? Mahathir also had his problem in the 1980s, but somehow he managed to overcome all that and become what he was in the 1990s. So it could be the same thing with Anwar. Maybe he could rule for 10 years or maybe 5 years, or who knows. But the environment is very different these days. And compared to that, like we mentioned just now about technology, and Anwar struggle in terms of messaging to put forward what he wants, or in fact, had messaging issues with respect to his visits, his official meetings for the G20 and all that is meeting. He had issues, right? Because of the he mentioned that private companies been sponsoring, and then he get all brickbacks. Mahathir wouldn't get that at all. All right. That's also a reflection of the technology that we have today, the social media and stuff. So I think the short answer is, I don't know. How do you compare Mahathir with Anwar? I think that the technology these days is going to be very unforgiving to Anwar compared to what it was for Mahathir.
Well, Mahathir get his taste of the technology that we have today in 2018.
Yeah.
Especially when you're serving in the LGE. Was there anything that you can see from your point of view at the time working on the LGE, and then LGE of course under Mahathir? Do you see Mahathir as what you think Mahathir was in the 90s?
I think Mahathir changed. Mahathir definitely changed in the 2018.
In what way?
It was more democratic.
He was forced to be democratic.
That also reflects the environment, right? The context of the era. The 80s is very different, and 1910s. I don't know how do you say that. 2010s. He was forced to be democratic because he formed a coalition with PDP, PKR, all these people that had progressive values. Then maybe. So he was forced to be democratic. But he also, I think, sometimes when you have a prime minister, you don't want the prime minister to say too much. And Mahathir tends to say a lot of stuff which makes people in the background feels like, okay, we need to do something about it. The messaging has to be massaged a little bit because he said things like, about debt, for instance, right? Debt is a very complex issue. Like he says something, and then people at ministry will obviously have to back it up, despite the fact that it's not quite accurate. But you cannot contradict your prime minister, so you have to that kind of thing.
Is Mahathir the same Mahathir behind closed door?
I didn't meet Mahathir as much. I mean, I'm just like a puny officer in a minister office, so I don't know. But from what I understand, from my conversation with other people that actually met him, he seems to be willing to listen to you.
Okay.
Right? He seems to be more consultative behind closed doors. But also, when he made up your mind, then it's hard luck. But before he makes up his mind, then you can, talk to influence whatever. But once you make up your mind, that's a problem.
I guess we have to invite the man himself, the podcast, to answer to this.
If you want to challenge anything that has been said here, you're more than free to explain yourself.
Oh no, you're gonna kill me.
So okay, let's try look it through now economic terms, right? Because we looked at it from the leadership style, perspective. So this is the new economic policy. The NEP has always been a point of conversation for so many years. And it happened in the 70s and paved the way for the so-called Malaysia's golden decade of the 90s, especially for the Malay middle income expansion. Do you see that trajectory shifting upwards or downwards? So do you still think that we're still continuing that trend, or has it stagnated in some way?
In terms of expansion of the middle class, I think the middle class has been growing ever since, right? I think Malaysia has been lucky in that way. But in terms of the future, it's very hard to see because the world is changing. The world has changed. Like in for instance, from the 2000 until recently, when Trump first got elected, that was a disruption to Malaysian growth. Mostly because the ascension of China into the WTO and the growing prominence of China, which was competing with Malaysian industries. But things have turned around. I think maybe 2010, 2012, after the global financial crisis, that because of hot money, things start to change a little bit. And then because of the trade war now, things to be turning to Malaysian favor. But again, a lot of this being written as we speak. Trump is being re-elected. You don't know what's going to happen. It could be that the new round of trade war going to hit Malaysia so bad. You don't know. But if you look for the past 20 years, maybe 15 years, I think, notwithstanding COVID, I think middle class has grown. I mean, Malaysia definitely richer now. I mean, notwithstanding your forex, for instance, right? Notwithstanding your forex changes, Malaysia probably could be classified as a high income economy under the World Bank definition, just because of forex, and that shows that we're already there. in terms of institution, in terms of other things, maybe not. But if you look at just the numbers, and if you just, for instance, if Malaysia had a packed exchange rate, right, and Malaysia could be there. So you could see that Malaysia has improved for the past 20, 30, 40 years, in fact.
You mentioned in one of a BFM interview that Malaysia was lucky because Plaza Accord benefited Malaysia at that time. Or is it the same benefit that we get from trade war with US and China?
In some ways, yes. But the Plaza Accord was lucky in the sense that it forced the Japanese companies to move out of Japan, and they decided Malaysia is one of the places that.
And that's why we have Lucas policy.
Yeah. So that's one lucky break. For here, now the players are different, slightly different. The US is still there, but now we have China, right? China, the same China that caused deindustrialization in Malaysia in the 2010s, and now because of trade war, they're coming to Malaysia to avoid the trade war. So in that sense, yes, we are lucky. But again, for Plaza Accord, we had 10 years to enjoy that. And here, you're not quite sure how long you're going to enjoy it because it's still new, right? And they are saying that the US might be unhappy that some Chinese company are coming to Malaysia and Malaysia is benefiting from this. And Malaysia might as well get hit with sanction, or not sanction, maybe tariff. All right. It could happen. So Malaysia is like walking a fine line right now. So it has to be careful in that sense.
Yeah, that does ground the conversation a bit because there's this assumption that Chinese investment is absolutely a net benefit for Malaysia, but we don't think of it in terms of on the spectrum or degree of benefit, right? So, I mean, when looking at the current trends of Chinese investment into Malaysia, how much does Malaysia stand to benefit? I mean, actually, if you can make just a rough quantification of it.
Well, I don't have numbers right now, but Malaysia do benefit. So far, I mean, you could see Chinese company coming over here. This is not counting the ECRL or the contracts, not counting the contracts. The contracts sometimes have been confused as investment when it's actually a government contract. But you do see the Chinese companies coming over here, building factories because it's cheaper, and trying to avoid the tariff that you impose in China. So it's basically like a China plus one strategy for Malaysia. Malaysia become a plus one. So it's benefiting Malaysia so far. But again, there's also a risk of the US expanding the tariff to cover places like Malaysia and Vietnam. I mean, they have expanded tariff in terms of solar panel, for instance. Malaysia got hit when US realized, these solar panels are moving to Malaysia.
Okay, this year Nobel Prize winner for economics won by two gentlemen, three, but two of them are the author of a book, Why Nation Fails. And they argue in the book is that why certain countries are advanced fail because how strong their institutions are. In terms of Malaysia, where we are in terms of our institutions, and what do you think the low-hanging fruits that government can improve on?
In terms of institution, I think first of all, I think Malaysia has been lucky for the past, 60 years in terms of institution, right? The British did a lot of horrific stuff, but they left us with, a reasonable institution compared to other people in the region. Right? If you think about other people in the region, you look at the institution, okay, maybe she got a good role in the game. But you could also say that Malaysian institution has suffered erosion over the years, and YNDB is definitely a big example of how an institution fail in some ways. And in terms of low-hanging fruits, that's a hard question. Maybe you should listen to Berse. No, but some of the low-hanging fruit I can think about in terms of institutions is really, I think in terms of fiscal institution. The migration from cash basis accounting, which the government on right now, towards accrual basis accounting, accrual accounting. So accrual accounting will be more transparent, would cover a lot more than just, because right now cash basis is just like what the government pay and what that's get inside in the accounts of the government. So you see like every budget, that's exactly it. But you don't consider what's your future obligation, all those stuff, and because of that, your accounting of the debt is not comprehensive, right? You on cash basis accounting, you have a cash basis. There's a lot of way to play around with the requirement, and in the sense that you can have off the balance sheet debt. It's not wrong per se, but that's how people make sure that the account look pretty legal, and it's still legal to do this. But if you have a accrual basis, then you are forced to account all this thing off the books because it's your future obligation, all that kind of stuff. The government has this. It's just they are not adopting it officially yet for whatever reason. So that's one easy way to do, because they already done it for the past 5 or 6 years, or even longer than that. Other things, one other easy things is really the separation of role between Prime Minister and Finance Minister. That's very easy. But also there's, obviously there are political consideration, but in terms of institution, then that's something you want to think about. And then the separation of the AG chambers between two sides, the prosecutor and the advisor of the government. I think that's also one clear thing that we should do to encourage independence of the judiciary and the separation between the judiciary and the executive. That's one thing we should think about.
And I guess it works towards the goal of trying to avoid too much central planning, because sometimes government doesn't have a monopoly on knowledge. Speaking of government and central planning, because they did discuss and debate the upcoming budget for the next year back in October. What's your impressions on the 2025 budget?
For me, I don't really look too much at the budget, because I think the national budget, a lot of time, like 80%, 90% of them, the spending have been fixed, right? A lot of things you get seen in the budget is just very small, right? And those are details I feel most of it's just some communication issues. It doesn't address. It's a as far as budget goes, it's good, right? It's good. Yeah, it's done generally well, but I feel we give too much attention to small details, but not the big picture into the budget. For instance, the long-term challenge are there. And some of the long-term challenges is just a fiscal challenge. Your revenue collection is too low, your tax collection is too low, and then you have your obligation, is growing in terms of welfare, healthcare, education. These things are growing. Malaysia is still a young population, young society, but we are aging in the next 25 years, 30 years. So we need to prepare for that. To prepare for that, we have to prepare now, right? You have to improve your tax collection so that you can fund the system to prepare for the next 20 years. It's not just welfare issues, right? It's also a matter of defense, because the world is becoming more unstable these days, and Malaysia needs defense as a deterrent. So in order to address all this long-term concern, you have to have your revenue improve. Your taxes has to go, and Malaysian taxes are very low anyway compared to our neighbors, in fact. So we have to raise it somehow. And in this budget, we do see the government trying to raise the revenue, but my fear is that these revenue are just too small to matter.
Okay. Too small. Would you say, because I had this notion just swirling in my head the other day, that when you say revenue may be too small to make a difference, but it seems that the Prime Minister's going on a very ideological bend of redistributing wealth from the top to the bottom, trying to emulate more like a social democracy kind of system. Right. Given the revelatory fact that you said this mode of revenue generation may not be too much of a difference, what is the decisive factor in trying to, let's say, enhance the Prime Minister's vision of redistributing wealth more equally and more equitably?
I think in my opinion, if you want to, you have to have a vision what you want Malaysia to be. You want to, for instance, a vision of having a more comprehensive welfare net. When you are committed towards revenue funded healthcare system, for instance, right? That means like pretty much cheap welfare system subsidized by the government and open to everybody regardless of your income level. And your education system, you make sure that it's accessible for primary, secondary, and increasingly tier 3 these days. Because these days, it's not enough to have 12 years worth of education anymore. It's very challenging. If you have less than that, or not at least 12 years, you have to have more in whatever form. So all this require the expansion of the public service, right? Because we're living in a very fast-changing world, and the only way to address this fast-changing world is to have a public service system, public service, who can prepare people for eventualities, right? Prepare them for a very minimum welfare that you can have, right? And to do this, if you have to have that vision, if you don't have the vision, and then people will start question, why are you paying more tax? Why are we giving more money to the federal government? Because we don't want this government to have more money. We have money. It has to be do something, right? So you have to have that vision. If you don't communicate that vision, then it's very hard to raise tax.
One of the vision that was expressed by the government is transition of energy, and of course that translated in the budget where retargeting subsidy, fuel subsidy. You mentioned about like we tax so low, but subsidy is one of the highest in this region. Even Anwar always open up his speech with comparing the RON 95 prices within the region. Put political consideration aside,
Right.
As an economist, pure economic answer, what is the best way to implement retargeting subsidy fuel?
Right. I mean, if it's just like no political consideration at all, then the best way is really to eliminate all the subsidies,
Okay.
and then turn that savings, part of the savings, to cash transfers, right? Like you could say even universal basic income in some ways, and then this basic income can be. I mean, some people will benefit more, shouldn't benefit for the basic income, but this can be addressed by the taxation system, right? You get income from the government in terms of universal income, you have to report that to the tax revenue as part of your income, and you can get tax that back. The problem is there's also this lag also, because you can pay first and then get back. Right? But you need to get the cycle going and then you get stable. So that's probably the best way. Just float at the pump. You can float however you want. You could be partial float like we had before, or fully float, whatever you want to address inflationary concern, whatever. That's easy to do. But float it, and then you give back money to people, cash in your account.
But in 2018, were you on board with the GST abolishment?
I wasn't, but I'm not the Prime Minister.
Okay, why didn't you think it was a good move?
Because with the GST, apart from the imperfection of implementation that existed, definitely that's not
The refunds and all that.
Yeah, the refund of all was done very badly. But it first of all, it offered Malaysia a stronger revenue base, right? And because suddenly all this underground, not all, most of them, had to pay tax. But before people, you berniaga, you get 10,000 per month, even don't pay tax at all.
Yeah.
But now you have to, because it's incorporated into the prices, right? If you don't pay the tax, then somebody is bearing the thing. So somebody will be angry because you're not getting the credits, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, just because it offered Malaysian government greater revenue, and Malaysia needed that revenue, right? Even if you discard all this interest expense the government have, 1AB, whatever, debt, you have your obligation for health, defense, education, also rising, and your infrastructure as well. Roads are not all roads are toll roads, right? You have your federal road, your state road, your municipal road. That has to be paid. And this obligation is rising because Malaysia is a young country, but we are growing old. We will get there. When you get there, when you realize we get there and you don't have the resources, it's already too late.
All right.
You have to prepare this like probably 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance. That's why you need to do it now, or it's too late.
Speaking of setting up 10, 20 years in advance when it comes to our institutions and disbursement of, let's say, resources, right? I'm going back to Sabah here as a Sabahan. There's always this, maybe you have more insight into how the bureaucracy works in the ministry, but every year there's always an allocation, special allocation given to Sabah and Sarawak, and year on year it keeps increasing. However, there has been statements saying that whatever that was given is not a lump sum payment allocation. Is that it's basically on an ad hoc basis, like what the state government needs. They ask the finance ministry, and then the finance ministry has to release it. And because of that, this is red tape that most of the time we're not able to use the full amount of the allocation and have to return it back. And then some political window dressing saying that, oh, now increased, but it's just carry over from the last one. Can you give us more insight into that bureaucracy that prevents a more direct system of just allocation?
I don't think I can't say that I was involved in that bureaucracy because the government is huge.
Yeah.
I have my interest in some stuff as well, but I do agree in some ways. We do need a little bit more systematic ways of handling things, and that has to be more transparent. It cannot be just on goodwill basis. Goodwill basis is not a sustainable things of doing things. It's not a subtle way of doing things. Because one day suddenly you're friends, the next day you're bergaduh, and who knows, right? So we need more stable relationship between federal government and the states and all these components of Malaysia. And yes, bureaucracy is a problem, but I think for the bureaucracy, I think that's a reflection that they have trouble allocating resources, right? There's so many demanding areas that require funding from everywhere around the country. So they sometimes, I think they struggle to prioritize spending, and this something would have to go back to the minister, because minister at the end of the day is the ultimate policy maker. The minister have to make the decision, and then up to the minister. But again, I have to say, go back to the statement I said just now, 80% or 90% of government revenue has already been set in for the next 10 years or so, 10 years or 15 years. So you have this very 10% that, in the budget you say all these new things happening, but it's just very small. So sometimes we get we get too excited about the 10%, but you forget about the 90% that is very hard to change. The only way you can change that is when you have better revenue. When you have better revenue, then you suddenly have more money to play around. But the obligation wouldn't change. The obligation is will always be there. In fact, we're still paying NDB debt. You cannot do anything about that until 2028. It's locked in. So that's just one example of how that 80%, 90% of the government revenue is locked in. And the rest, in fact, we still... it's not wrong to run deficit, but, Malaysia runs in deficit. That shows you that there's allocation issues.
Talking about things being fixed and how we need some changes also at the same time, I want to pick your brain on healthcare, how we fund our healthcare.
Right.
Is it realistic to pay RM1 and then expect a 5-star service, and then now we have a epidemic of doctors bullied in workplace, whatnot, and it resulted in death in Lahad Datu in Sabah.
Yep.
Is it not about money, or there's money can do more into mitigating all these negative effects?
It's not all about money. It's also about culture within the particular hospital or particular ministry or whatever, or the system. But I'm not a doctor. I don't have insight into the culture of nurses or whatever in a particular hospital or the ministry. But I do, for instance, I am a beneficiary of the public healthcare system, because sometimes some of the my relatives, for instance, went to the public hospital for operation. It took a little bit time to go through it, but they addressed the issue, right? And then they did operation and was successful, the radiation therapy and stuff. So the public system provide that at a very reasonable cost. If you go to a private hospital, it probably costs you 20,000, 30,000 in a public hospital, just a couple hundred ringgit. So So yes, money cannot solve all things, but it does make things easier, right? And you need money to pay doctors better. Not just doctors, but doctors and nurses and all the pharmacies and all the stuff better. You can also hire more people, right? You need more people, in fact, right? So, but if you don't pay people a good money, they will go away. They will go to private hospital and then people like you and me that will have to go to private hospital if public service is not up to par. And somebody even leave Malaysia and work in Singapore or Australia or Canada or the UK even with the NHS system. They have their own problem. But, you need money to pay people better and stay here in Malaysia. Or else, we're going to get, again, we are aging society. We need the healthcare system to be tip-top. If we don't do it now, there's a message again.
We're going to be like Japan as well,
But Japan is doing pretty well. I mean, they funded their service quite well, and they have that culture. I think we struggle a little bit on that side.
Okay, just going back to previously, we talked about the relationship between the federal government and the state government, and how the federal government, in terms of its revenue, is locked in and doesn't really have a lot of leeway into expanding into other different ways. How did that relationship between the federal and the state play out from your vantage point and perspective? Because I'm considering that the minister had to balance out his duties in the federal government at the same time back in Penang, right? How did that play out?
Sorry, the question is, how does the federal government handle...
how does the relationship with the state government and federal government, from your perspective, from your vantage point, how did that play out at that level?
Well, I think the states are always ask for more money, regardless of state. Still like police, definitely ask for more money. I mean, police...
There are only 8 people there.
That's not fair. There are people over there. But that shows places like Malacca, for instance, also require a lot of money. And of course, this doesn't mention Sabah and Sarawak, which has its own special position in Malaysia that require a little bit more attention. But the states, notwithstanding all this like official structure, there's also political consideration, right? This political consideration, obviously, a lot always overriding concern for the minister. For instance, if you need in a unity government, for instance, I'm sure Sarawak, for instance, get a lot what it wants, right? Because for the stability of the federal government, you need the Sarawak partners, and also in Sabah as well. Especially Sabah right now seems to be having a little bit of controversy, but they are still a partner to the federal government, and they are important to the federal government. So this thing in terms of Sabah and Sarawak, it definitely gives Sabah Sarawak extra leverage in terms of requesting in terms of resources and stuff. But again, sometimes some ministers have certain affinity to certain states. For instance, Langor gets focus from the Ministry of Economy. And they're going in, obviously, when he was finance minister, he has also affinity with Penang because he also an MP Penang, right? So it also depends on that thing as well.
Right. I want to go out a little bit. Want to ask a general questions about economics because you are in economy, and there's a joke, economic jokes where 2 people asking like a dare, and then if you want to eat this feces, I give you 1,000, and then the person eat, okay, pay him 1,000, and then there's another person, eat this feces, I give you 1,000. But in the end, as you can see, no one's better off.
Right.
Both get the money back, but the GDP is 2,000 ringgit.
Right.
Is GDP relevant how we measure economy in 21st century?
Well, I think a lot of people would agree that GDP has some weaknesses. I mean, there's a lot of weaknesses, a lot of issues with it. But I think the attractiveness of GDP is that it's probably the best thing that we have compared to all the alternatives, right?
It's like democracy, huh?
Maybe. I don't know.
We're not working with the best, we're working with what seems to work so far, right?
I mean, putting aside the discussion of democracy, it's also a complicated question. But in terms of, GDP is probably, GNP, however variation of it you have, it probably one of the right now what the best we have to measure welfare. Because at the end of the day, what we want to measure is really welfare, whether we are better off or not as a society, not just as an individual. So in many ways, there are a lot of stuff, again, weaknesses that we measure in terms of war, for instance. If you use your weapons, you kill people, your GDP can go up.
Yeah.
Right? That will happen in the Second World War in some ways because of the manufacture of weapons and employment within the war complex, it's in the military complex. But beyond that cases, special cases, I think a lot of time GDP works quite well, right? If there any other way to measure wellness, to measure welfare, like gross happiness index, for instance, that feels very subjective, right?
Okay.
How do you measure something subjective? If GDP there's also subjective matters happening in the GDP. For instance, you can measure goods you produce, your value added. You know where the money goes. But in terms of services, then how do you price service? That's subjective. So services are more subjective than goods. So service are very difficult things to do. But compared to gross happiness index, for instance, GDP is feels more concrete, right? You can be happy, but are you better off in terms of To be fair, I mean GDP is a measure of material wealth. Material wealth, right? Yeah. You imagine material wealth, but if you don't consider material wealth as something that is tangible, that's something that matters to you, then maybe it's not good for you, right? Maybe you want to do something else. That's why we have gross happiness index, for instance, or apa ni? That human development index. That's something alternative that we might want. I mean, they have their uses, definitely, because not everything, again, is material wealth. Money cannot buy everything that we mentioned just now. So they are alternative that can be used together with the GDP. So I would say GDP is still useful.
I don't know, just picking your brain and being a bit more general here. And a bit more, I would say, our topic here. Is you mentioned in the interview, you talk about the Phnom Penh skyline in Cambodia.
Right.
Can you tell us what's so fascinating about the skyline? I haven't been there myself, so.
I first went to Phnom Penh when I just got off university, 2011 maybe, 2012.
They can figure out how old you are right now.
I mean, I went to multiple universities. So it's difficult. It's not as easy. I went to multiple universities. So back then, the thing with Phnom Penh is that Phnom Penh is on the Mekong River. It's on the Tonle Sap River.
It's Delta, yeah?
Yeah, it's no Delta. Delta is on Ho Chi Minh.
Okay.
Ho Chi Minh, Saigon. But Phnom Penh is inland, where the Tonle Sap River from Tonle Sap Lake merge with the Mekong. So the Phnom Penh is on the left side. So it's because Cambodia was a French colony for several decades, I think. And there's a lot of French architecture in Phnom Penh. So it's like a little Paris. So you have a boulevard, and then the probably 4 or 5 stories building, which is, if you look from far, it's quite nice, right? But it's a colonial architecture. So that what my first impression of Phnom Penh in 2011, 2012. So it's a huge city, sprawling city, but short buildings, and laid back, a lot of tuk-tuks. And it's probably 20 years, 30 years behind Kuala Lumpur at that time in terms of development. But it's very laid back. So I revisited Phnom Penh recently, this year. And it's changed. It's changed I mean, you can see still the palaces, obviously, that's not going to change. You can see the short building, but now you see a lot of glass building, tall building, 40, 60 stories high. There, it's like a different city altogether. It feels the skyline totally changed. So it's quite a dramatic change that shows that how just show the kind of development Phnom Penh especially has been undergoing for the past 10 years. Yeah. So it's just rapid development.
All that China money must be really good, right? To make all this tall glass towers.
It's China money, but it's also I think it's also unfair to just put it on China money. It's also Cambodia became a sort of a textile powerhouse. Just like Cambodia, right? Cambodia also a textile powerhouse. That's how they industrialize. Bangladesh now has a higher GDP per capita, I think, versus India. That's a
Driven
huge-
by the textile industry.
it's created by the textile industry. That's how they are industrializing. It's the same thing with Cambodia. I don't remember the Cambodian numbers, but I imagine it's been shooting up like crazy. So that's, I think what I was fascinated with Phnom Penh is really the manifestation of the city as Cambodian economic development for the past 10 years or so. So it's just like rapid development.
If you can pinpoint one country in the world where it has a very high in terms of economic resilience, the growth, whatever, which country and which model would you say would be? Of course, there's no perfect economy system, but which one is, do you think, the best?
Well, very difficult. I think very difficult because first of all, the world is changing, and certain model that worked in the past doesn't work anymore. I mean, one country that is facing that is really Germany, right? Germany used to be a powerhouse. Now the economy is struggling because of competition from China.
Shutting down plants.
Yeah, the nuclear power plants is gone. Dependency on Russia, and the automotive industry seems to be in trouble. So German model seems to be going in trouble. China also seems to be doing really well for the past 20, 30 years. But recently, they realized that they do need a little bit of more consumer. Well, I wouldn't say they realized, but a lot of people are saying that because China has been pushing industrial investment, industrial upgrading, and all this stuff, and things are just not pushing up. So people are saying that maybe you need to boost up the consumer more than your industrial side. So I don't know, is there a best model? I think at the end of the day, at this moment, you probably need a mix of a sort of a laissez-faire economy and a planned economy. You have to have industrial policy. I think now what you need to do is really something, you have to have industrial policy because the consensus on free trade is unraveling. Yeah. So once your consensus is unraveling, so everybody is fighting for themselves. So you do need your industrial policy coming in. So industrial policy is a reflection of the collapse of trade relation around the world.
You mentioned about 90s being a golden era for Malaysia,
Right.
But I think the same thing could be said the same to Japan's economic growth, because in the 90s it's like the pinnacle of what Japan is. But after that, it was more of a decline.
Yeah.
Why? What's the barrier that Japan couldn't pass through?
No, I think for Japan, it's really demographics. I mean, there is real estate issues over there, just like China, because people are now putting parallel between China and Japan because of the real estate crisis. But the problem with Japan was that your demography was aging and shrinking, which is also the same things happening in China. So demography is a big factor. That's also something Malaysia needs to think about. That's why I'm saying just now about your aging society and stuff. Because demography, if you don't address that in terms of your services or rather immigration even, then you're gonna follow Japan. And in fact, if we don't play our cards right, we're probably gonna be not as rich as Japan and grow older first, which is also already happening in Thailand. Thailand is very old. Like the median is like 40 something. Malaysia is probably 30 right now. Thailand is much so, and we are much richer in Thailand in terms of GDP per capita, and we are much younger. That shows our trajectory in Thailand. Thailand probably going down already, but we probably have a little bit of leeway. So while we have the leeway, that's why we have to prepare all these things, our challenges.
Okay, just picking apart a bit more on the welfare when it comes to an aging society. Sometimes it tends to focus more on providing welfare and assistance to aging peoples, right?
Right.
But obviously the answer to an aging population is to have high fertility rates, right? Have more children, which I think the fertility rate in Japan has completely crashed and collapsed. And Malaysia might be on that way as well. So can you talk to us more about welfare when it comes to promoting younger couples to increase the fertility rate?
Wow. I think that's
Because
a,
look from one side, which is like elderly care, but what about the other side of the spectrum as well?
for the young ones. Well, I have to say that there's smarter people that focuses on the issue that also struggle to answer it, I think. So I think I will struggle to answer it. But I think sometimes some of the easier way is really to make I think to support couple in the sense that I think the easiest way is really providing financial support. And you make it easier for them to get married, for instance. It's not just making it easy in terms of money, but also in terms of, your processes, right? In Malaysia, for example, if you're Muslim, getting married is like it's bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's marriage cost.
I wouldn't know. I'm not married.
So it's something you need to thought about. But also at the same time, it's not just about getting married, but also what happened after that, right? What happened to childbearing, child caring. So you need more balanced gender responsibility, for instance. You cannot just have the female side of the equation have paternity leave, and the guy, the husband, have like just 1 week off. Because if you do that, then you have trouble with income equality within genders, and then that will affect your cultural interaction between genders as well and in society. But what you need to do that you need to balance your paternity leave and maternity leave. That's one way. And then again, children catch. That's one way, because it's very hard to, from what I understand about other couple that have children's, childcaring is an expensive business. It's an expensive experience to go through. So the government also have to support that, to sort of providing support for childcaring in terms of kindergarten, for instance.
I think that's the only time that we have for this episode. But before we let you go, Hafiz, we would like to end this with a lighter note.
Right.
So we want to ask something very questions that a bit personal. But what is your favorite travel destination?
Oh, wow. I mean, in the past, I
Is
think
it Phnom Penh again?
No. I mean, I've been to a couple of places. I think I generally like going to places with history. I think one of the places that I've been to was Burma, Myanmar.
Okay.
I think Bagan. Bagan was quite an experience because I went there before tourism took off.
Okay.
Before it really took off. So you went there. There's no people. I mean, there are people. There were people, but you went there. There's a plane, and then this feels like if you're a fan of Star Wars, right? You think about Yavin 4. Yavin 4 was supposed to be full of ruined temples, right? And that was Bagan.
Okay.
Bagan is a plain, all these temples. Some couple of them huge temple that probably go 10 stories high, 10 stories high. And you climb it up, and you can go inside, and there's a cavernous and all this, 500 years old, 600 old murals, Buddhist mural. So that was like awe-inspiring. I think Bagan was definitely.
How about music? Any specific genre?
I think I'm a 90s kids. So I think I used to listen a lot to Oasis.
Okay. Not shaming that. Yeah.
Yeah. But also I think also Butterfingers. I like Butterfingers as well. Also 90 music. The 90s one, not the later one.
What currently a book that you are reading right now?
I'm reading Kam Raslan.
Okay.
Kam Raslan, Confession of an Old Boy.
Yeah. What is it about?
So basically, it's a satire of this character. It's about a character, Dato' Hamid, supposedly an old Malay guy that worked in the civil service, been everywhere. So the author made fun of that kind of characters of the civil service. So it's really a collection of stories about the person, the fictional person, according to Kam Raslan, but sounds like a real
Inspired,
person.
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. If the listeners want to get this book, where can they get this book?
I think some places are Kinokuniya.
Okay.
You see? I think the easiest way, because I think some of the stores are running out of it.
Okay.
But I think the easiest one is really to go online to Fixie. I think Shopee. Fixie has an online store on Shopee. So you just search the end of the 1990s on Shopee. You'll go to Fixie bookstore and you can buy it. That's probably the easiest. Otherwise, if you like physical copies, maybe Kinokuniya.
Okay, on this note, will we sometimes see the end of the 2020s? Is that on your
I don't know.
writing anything?
This book took me 8 years to finish. So I don't know.
All right. That's it for this episode. Adi, if our listeners would like to listen to audio only, where should they go?
You can check out just audio on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like short form content, you can also check us out on our TikTok channel, our Instagram page, but also our YouTube, I think, has become our one-stop shop for everything, really. You can find full episodes there. You can find the shorts there as well. So there's many options for you to check out your platform of choice.
If you like today's content, please comment down below. And if you want to ask Hafiz to be on here, again, please put down Hafiz on the comment below. And you can follow him on X.com. What's your handle? Twitter handle?
Right. It's __Earth.
_Earth. Okay. So with that, goodbye for now.